From the former YouTuber calling Diaz his most desired opponent, to the new change in fight rules that gives one fighter an obvious edge, here's why Nate Diaz should and will beat Jake Paul in their upcoming bout on August 5th, 2023, which would also be the MMA favorite's first step into the world of professional boxing. And let's just say that he's really excited about fighting Jake. Nate knows that Jake's become the biggest thing in boxing these days, besides people like Canelo Alvarez, and he's really looking forward to changing that when he wins. It's no secret that Diaz has a reputation for being pretty outspoken, so he's also openly said that he's the best, not just in the MMA world, but in all combat sports. His upcoming opponent, Jake, on the other hand, is still reeling from his first professional loss against Tommy Fury back in February 2023, so this fight could be a chance for this dude to redeem himself. But it's more than just that. Here's the thing, Jake's always thought of Diaz as a badass fighter who knows what he's doing. In fact, he'd been saying that since Diaz's UFC days, expressing his desire for Nate just to wrap up his MMA career so he could come to the boxing side. That's right. Jake's actually been wanting to fight Diaz for a very long time now, and he knows that everyone else has been too. He even said that Nate comes first on his to-fight list, and now that the bout's finally decided, I can't wait to see how it'll unfold. Of course, bookers have already placed their bets, and they've mostly got their eyes set on Jake emerging as the winner here. Yeah, his former UFC superstar opponent is a massive underdog, but according to people like Andre Ward, maybe people should stop calling him that, because the two-division world champion knows that Nate may be much older, but he can really cause some trouble for Paul inside the ring. And hey, he's got his reasons too. First, Andre talked about Nate's recent pad work video. For those of you who haven't seen this clip, a video of Nate hitting the pads with his trainer, Ernie Reyes Jr., has recently been making rounds on Twitter. And safe to say, it wasn't very popular with fans who didn't like what they saw. More than dislike, though, these observers were actually concerned for the well-being of the UFC veteran, who, according to them, was getting too old. But Andre thinks that these so-called fans are being too quick to judge here. He talked about how most people had just misread the play, and those shots in the video might not look very pretty, but you can't deny that they just kept coming. I mean, Nate was still going at it from every angle, showing that he's clearly still got his spark. Plus, as Ward said, this man's been around for a very long time, so he definitely knows what he's doing, well enough to make this bout really tough for Jake. Jake's amazing too, don't get me wrong. Whether you like him or not, this 26-year-old YouTuber turned boxer has proven his worth time and again, winning against some of boxing's biggest names. I mean, that man had people like Ben Askren and Tyron Woodley beat. And let's not even forget his stellar victory against ex-MMA GOAT Anderson Silva. Of course, Andre knows that Jake is really good and his natural right hand is really powerful. But he also knows Nate really well, seeing as how the two have trained together for a long time, and he can confidently say that Diaz can easily cause some issues for Paul in the ring. And if Nate can get in there and somehow absorb those right-hand punches, then it definitely won't be too difficult for him to win. Because he'll keep coming from all angles, just like he showed in his training video. And Andre isn't the only one backing Nate here, because the Stockton Slugger's former opponent and one of UFC best fighters, Conor McGregor, is also in his corner. And he fully expects Nate to come out on top here. The notorious Irishman, who rarely compliments anyone at all, let alone people who've beaten him, said that he really likes Diaz. And he expects him to win against Jake, who he called a cat. McGregor even said that he could already picture the fight, and he knows that Diaz will be all up in Jake's face, peppering him until he wins. And much like Conor, Jake's former opponent, Anderson Silva, also expects his old rival to lose here. Silva knows that Jake's been putting in a lot of work for this fight and has been training a lot, and he respects all that. It's professional, showing how dedicated Jake really is to this sport, much more than people expect him to be given his YouTuber status. And that's not all. Silva also knows that both Diaz and Paul are really good fighters, saying that it's hard to predict who will win this bout. Paul has a great coach, and he's very smart in the ring. But at the same time, Anderson said that Nate's much more experienced. He's got good boxing skills as well as great cardio, and simply put, he's a beast. What's more, Silva also correctly pointed out that this fight is more about timing than it is about power and strength, and we all know that Diaz has great timing. And when you go to fight him, you don't just need a couple of training sessions in a week. Nope. Jake better be preparing for war here, because otherwise, there's no way in that he's taking that win home. And it's not just McGregor and Silva saying this. You've also got UFC fighter Bobby Green, who said that Nate's style is perfect for defeating Paul. And Green knows what he's talking about because just like Andre, he's also trained with Nate. Seeing his journey up close, Bobby claims that people are really sleeping on Diaz's boxing, which is actually much better than most people think it is. To the fighter, Nate's actually better at boxing than he is at MMA, and you've all seen his force in the UFC, right? So just imagine how good his boxing is. Because Green here is 100% sure that Diaz is going to secure that bag because he really deserves it. And judging by Diaz's starry record, we all know he's right. Let's face it, this dude's been a lightning force in the UFC since he entered the organization, all the way back in 2007, by winning the 5th season of The Ultimate Fighter. And soon after that, he was on his way to beating huge and established fighters of that time, like Jim Miller, Gray Maynard, and even Cowboy. Any true MMA fans know just how big these names are, so if Nate could have easily beaten them, someone like Jake Paul doesn't even stand a chance. What's more, Nate became the first ever fighter to defeat McGregor back in 2016, and his last fight against Tony Ferguson in September 2022 was also a win. So what makes you think that he's getting old and rusty and won't stand a chance against Paul? Especially since they've changed the rules up a bit now, which gives him an even higher chance of winning. In case you didn't know, there's been a super last-minute change in the rules in the August fight. It was initially supposed to last around 8 rounds, but that's just been extended to 10 rounds now. And as it turns out, it was Nate who made that request. Plus, his fans had also been protesting against the 8 rounds rule, and they had good reason too. I mean, even Jake himself has tweeted that a 10-rounder would be better for Nate. Paul knows that the fight going to the later rounds really gives his opponent the upper hand here, but that doesn't mean he's scared or anything though. He's still all in. But how exactly do 2 more rounds help Diaz? Well, it's more about Paul than it is about his opponent. Here's the thing. You've usually seen Paul being a force in most of his fights, but you've also seen that whenever fights start to get to the later rounds, he starts struggling. And that's probably because of his low stamina.
There's a left hook in. Some power shots.
You could say that his stamina has gotten better now, but that wasn't the case when he lost against Tommy the last time he was in the ring, which is really making the fans question him. Paul may think that the fight could easily end early, but this is Nate we're talking about, an MMA champion. He's definitely not going to give up that easily.
And from there, it was all Nate Diaz. He pressured, and we talked about that high ball.
So from these changes in the rules, placing the former YouTuber at a disadvantage, to him calling the MMA star his most desired opponent, this was why Nate Diaz should beat Jake Paul.